Maybe you should have flown economy where you belong." The words dripped with contempt as Rebecca loomed over the Williams triplets, her sneer slicing through first class. 8-year-old Kai clutched his medical bracelet, stomach cramping, while passengers looked away in shameful silence. His brothers shifted protectively beside him, but the humiliation burned. To her, they were just black children to belittle. To the crowd, an awkward scene best ignored. What Rebecca didn't know was that the quiet man in the aisle seat wasn't just their father. He was the billionaire owner of the very airlines she served. And his response would end careers in a single landing. Those 3 boys Rebecca insulted their miracle babies who survived 8 years of their parents' infertility struggles. That sick child she refused to feed. He nearly died twice before his first birthday from a condition that required the very food Rebecca denied him. Rewind 6 hours to see how this nightmare began. 3 innocent children boarded Skyline Airlines, Flight 447, for what should have been the adventure of their lives. Instead, they encountered discrimination so shocking, medical neglect so cruel, that it would expose the ugly truth about how black families are still treated in first-class cabins. Welcome back to Black and Bruised Stories. If you're new here, you've just joined a community dedicated to truth, justice, and survival. Show some love by clicking the like and subscribe button. Before we dive deeper into this story, drop a comment where you are watching from and what time it is for you right now. This is the story of Marcus Williams, tech billionaire, worth $2.3 billion, watching flight attendants torture his miracle children at 30,000 FT. Prepare yourself for a journey that will make your blood boil, break your heart, and restore your faith in justice when a father's love collides with unlimited power. These are the Williams triplets, Jaden, Kai, and Zion. 8 years old, identical in everything, except one medical condition that would turn a family vacation into a fight for their children's dignity and survival. Understand this. Marcus and Serena Williams didn't just want children. They acted for them with every fiber of their being for 8 long, torturous years. Imagine the countless doctor's appointments, the failed IVF treatments, the miscarriages that shattered their hearts into a million pieces. Feel Serena's tears as she held negative pregnancy test after negative pregnancy test, while Marcus built his tech empire partly to escape the pain of their empty nursery. For 8 years, Marcus poured his grief into code, creating algorithms that would eventually make him a billionaire. For 8 years, Serena decorated and redecorated a nursery that remained heartbreakingly empty. Their marriage nearly crumbled twice under the weight of their shared sorrow. Friends stopped inviting them to baby showers. Family members learned not to ask about grandchildren. Then, miracle of miracles, the IVF worked. Not 1 baby, but 3. Picture Serena's ultrasound at 8 weeks, the technician's gasp of surprise, Marcus fainting in the chair beside her. 3 heartbeats, 3 perfect little lives growing inside the woman who had waited longer than most to become a mother. But their joy turned to terror when the boys arrived. Jaden came first, healthy and screaming. Zion followed 2 minutes later, perfectly pink and breathing. Then came Kai, silent and blue. Witness the nightmare that followed. Emergency surgery at 6 weeks old for pyloric stenosis, a condition where the stomach muscle thickens and blocks food from entering the small intestine. For weeks, tiny Kai couldn't keep anything down. Imagine Marcus and Serena taking shifts in the NICU, watching their miracle baby fight for his life. The doctors explained that Kai would need to eat small amounts frequently for the rest of his life, or risk violent vomiting that could be life-threatening. They nearly lost him twice before his first birthday. Now, 8 years old, the triplets are Marcus and Serena's entire world. Jaden, the natural leader with his father's sharp mind and protective instincts. Zion, the peacemaker who inherited his mother's gentle heart and gift for reading emotions. And Kai, the gentle soul who survived so much pain as a baby, is now wearing a medical bracelet that explains his condition to anyone who needs to know. This Friday morning in September, Marcus Williams, founder and CEO of Williams Tech Industries, worth $2.3 billion, is taking his Miracle Boys on their first business trip, their destination Los Angeles, to tour his newest acquisition, Williams Aerospace. But more than that, this trip represents Marcus sharing his success with the three boys he and Serena waited 8 years to hold. Picture the scene at Chicago O'Hare Airport. Marcus, 42 years old, dressed in his signature black business suit, walking through the terminal with three identical boys in white polo shirts and dark jeans. Passengers stop and stare at the adorable triplets, each carrying a small backpack with their name embroidered on it. Jaden walks closest to his father, already showing signs of the businessman he might become. Zion holds Kai's hand, a gesture so natural it brings tears to strangers' eyes. And Kai, despite his medical challenges, beams with excitement about seeing real airplanes up close. Marcus chose first-class seats specifically for this trip, not for the luxury but for the space and service he hoped would make Kai's medical needs easier to manage. He'd called Skyline Airlines weeks ago explaining his son's condition, requesting special meals that arrive every 2 hours, and providing detailed medical documentation. The airline representative assured him everything would be perfect. As they approach the gate, Marcus kneels down to his son's eye level, a habit he developed during those terrifying early months when he wasn't sure Kai would survive. He looks into 3 pairs of identical dark eyes that mirror his own and speaks with the tenderness of a father who knows how precious these moments are. He reminds them about airplane safety, about staying in their seats, about using their inside voices, but most importantly, he reminds Kai about his eating schedule. Every 2 hours, small portions, crackers and juice when he feels nauseous. Marcus has packed Kai's emergency medical kit complete with anti-nausea medication prescribed by their family doctor, Dr. Martinez. The boys are practically vibrating with excitement. They've studied airplanes online, watched YouTube videos about how jets work, and dreamed of this day for months. Kai especially loves planes despite his medical limitations. He wants to be a pilot when he grows up, just like his hero Bessie Coleman, the first African-American female pilot. As they board Skyline Airlines Flight 447, Marcus feels that familiar surge of protective love that has defined his life since becoming a father. These aren't just his children. They're his miracles, his answered prayers, his reason for everything he's built. What he doesn't know is that in the next 6 hours, he'll discover just how far he'll go to protect them. Remember this moment of pure joy and anticipation, because what happens next will shatter this family's faith in humanity and test every ounce of Marcus Williams' legendary self-control. If you're already feeling protective of these miracle boys, smash that subscribe button, because you're going to need tissues for what's coming next. This story gets so much more intense, and I promise you've never heard anything like what these flight attendants did to little Kai Williams. What would you do if you had waited 8 years for children and watched strangers treat them with cruelty? Let me know in the comments, because Marcus Williams' response will shock you. Step aboard Skyline Airlines, Flight 447, and feel the boys' excitement as they see their first-class seats. Jaden immediately starts examining the seat controls. Zion marvels at the leg room, and Kai carefully places his medical kit in the seat pocket, where he can reach it quickly. Marcus shows his sons the safety features, pointing out the oxygen masks and life vests with the patience of a father who treasures every teaching moment. But watch what happens when Rebecca Thompson, senior flight attendant with 15 years of experience and unconscious biases buried deep in her psyche, approaches their row. Rebecca sees a black man with 3 children in first class, and her first thought isn't welcome aboard. It's suspicious. It's the toxic assumption that they don't belong here. Marcus extends his hand professionally and introduces himself and his sons. He explains Kai's medical condition with the practiced efficiency of a father who's had this conversation hundreds of times. He shows Rebecca the medical documentation, the special meal requests confirmed weeks ago, and Kai's medical bracelet that clearly states his condition. Rebecca nods dismissively, barely glancing at the paperwork, her mind already made up about this family. Sarah Chin, the junior flight attendant, seems more professional initially. She acknowledges the medical needs with appropriate concern and assures Marcus that everything will be handled properly. But notice how she doesn't take notes, doesn't ask follow-up questions, and seems nervous around Rebecca's obvious disapproval. The flight takes off smoothly. The boys press their faces to the windows, watching Chicago disappear beneath them. Kai points out landmarks he recognizes, his medical condition forgotten in the joy of flight. Marcus feels that familiar swell of pride watching his miracle children experience something new. 4:45 minutes. Everything is perfect. Then the first sign of trouble emerges. It's been exactly 2 hours since the boys' last meal, and Kai's internal clock is as precise as any medical equipment. His little stomach begins to cramp, and he knows from experience that he needs food soon, or he'll start feeling sick. Hear the politeness in 8-year-old Kai's voice as he presses his call button and asks Sarah for his special crackers. His words are careful and respectful, exactly as his parents taught him. But watch Sarah's uncertain response as she glances nervously at Rebecca, then tells Kai that meal service doesn't start for another hour. She doesn't remember his medical condition clearly and is afraid to make decisions without Rebecca's approval. Marcus intervenes gently, explaining again that Kai can't wait for regular meal service. His pyloric stenosis means his stomach empties differently than other children's. Without regular small meals, the acid builds up and causes violent vomiting that can lead to dehydration and electrolyte imbalance. It's not a preference, it's a medical necessity. But Rebecca overhears this conversation and approaches with an attitude that makes other passengers look up nervously. Her tone is sharp, condescending, carrying the authority of someone who's used to being obeyed, mixed with something darker that makes Marcus's protective instincts flare. She tells Marcus that everyone has to wait for meal service. No exceptions. Her voice carries a particular edge when she emphasizes everyone, as if she's dealing with people trying to get special treatment they don't deserve. Feel the tension building as Marcus maintains his composure while explaining his son's medical needs for the third time. He shows Rebecca the confirmation email for Kai's special meals, the medical documentation signed by Dr. Martinez, and Kai's medical bracelet. But Rebecca barely glances at any of it, her arms crossed defensively. In her mind, this is about a demanding passenger trying to manipulate the system, and she's seen this before with certain types of passengers. Another hour passes, and Kai is beginning to show the early signs of distress. His face grows pale, and he starts holding his small stomach with both hands. He's been through this before, so he knows what's coming. The cramping will get worse, then the nausea, then the vomiting that won't stop until he gets proper nutrition. Witness the heartbreak as Kai approaches Sarah directly, his 8-year-old legs a little unsteady as the plane hits turbulence. He looks up at her with those huge, dark eyes that mirror his father's and speaks with the vulnerability of a child who's learned that adults don't always help when he's sick. He explains that his tummy hurts and he's getting scared. He shows her his medical bracelet with small, shaking fingers and asks, "Please, just for one cracker, anything to help his stomach stop hurting." His voice cracks with the effort of not crying, because his parents taught him to be brave even when he's scared. But before Sarah can respond, Rebecca intervenes with ice-cold authority. She tells Kai to return to his seat without even looking at his medical bracelet. "No exceptions," she says firmly, as if an 8-year-old with a documented medical condition is trying to cheat the system. Feel your heart break as Kai's shoulders slump and he walks back to his seat, trying not to let his father see how much her rejection hurt. Rebecca notices other passengers watching this interaction and decides to make her authority unmistakably clear. She approaches Kai with the kind of aggressive body language that makes adults uncomfortable, let alone children. She towers over this small boy and tells him in a voice loud enough for nearby passengers to hear that everyone gets hungry, that he's not special, and that he needs to stop bothering the flight attendants. But here's where Rebecca crosses a line that can never be uncrossed. When Kai whispers that he has pyloric stenosis and explains what that means in the simple words an 8-year-old uses, Rebecca's response is devastating. She tells him she doesn't care what condition he thinks he has, and that his parents probably told him to say that to get free food. Those words to a child who nearly died as a baby from the very condition Rebecca is dismissing. Imagine Marcus witnessing this interaction from his seat, watching his miracle child be dismissed, belittled and accused of lying by a woman who's supposed to ensure passenger safety. Remember, this is the same little boy Marcus held in the NICU, wondering if he'd ever come home. This is the child who survived surgery at 6 weeks old, who fought for every ounce of weight gain, who learned to eat carefully and purposefully because his life depends on it. The next part of this story will test your faith in humanity, because what Rebecca Thompson does next to a sick 8-year-old boy will make you question how we train airline employees and how we protect our most vulnerable passengers. 30 minutes later, Kai can't sit still anymore. The cramping in his stomach has intensified, and he knows from experience that he's approaching the point of no return. If he doesn't get food soon, he'll start dry heaving, then vomiting, then potentially face dehydration serious enough to require emergency medical attention. So this 8-year-old boy who has been through more medical trauma than most adults makes a decision that will haunt everyone who witnesses it. He gets up from his seat, walks down the aisle to where Rebecca is preparing meal carts, and does something that no child should ever have to do. Prepare yourself for this image because you'll never forget it. Little Kai Williams, wearing his white polo shirt and dark jeans, drops to his knees in the airplane aisle. He looks up at Rebecca Thompson with tears threatening to spill from his eyes and begs. Actually begs this grown woman for just one cracker to help his sick stomach. His words are burned into the memory of every passenger who witnessed them. Please, ma'am, just one cracker. I promise I'll be good. I don't want to throw up on the plane. Please help me. This child who survived surgery as a baby, who fights a medical condition every single day, who has never asked for anything he didn't desperately need, is kneeling in an airplane aisle begging for food that could prevent a medical emergency. And Rebecca Thompson's response, she tells this child to get up because he's causing a scene and embarrassing his father. She turns her back and walks away, leaving 8-year-old Kai kneeling on the airplane floor, abandoned and afraid. Witness the exact moment Marcus Williams sees his miracle child begging for medical care. The same child he and Serena waited 8 years to conceive. The same child who nearly died twice before his first birthday. The same child whose every meal is carefully planned to prevent exactly this kind of crisis. Marcus doesn't explode, he doesn't yell, he doesn't make threats. Instead, something far more dangerous happens. The billionaire tech mogul who built an empire through calculated intelligence begins to plan. He starts taking notes. He begins recording conversations, and he makes a phone call that will change everyone's life on this plane. But first, he tends to his son. Because before he's a CEO, before he's a billionaire, before he's anything else, Marcus Williams is a father who will move heaven and earth to protect his miracle children. If this story is making your blood boil, you need to subscribe right now, because Rebecca Thompson's cruelty gets even worse, and Marcus Williams' response will leave you cheering. The justice that's coming will restore your faith that good can triumph over evil. How would you react if you saw your child begging for medical care because Marcus Williams' next move will shock everyone on this plane, including the flight crew, who have no idea they just messed with the wrong family? Watch as Kai returns to his seat, his small body trembling from both hunger and humiliation. His brothers Jaden and Zion immediately sense their triplets' distress. These boys share a bond that goes beyond typical siblings. They survived the same desperate years of their parents' infertility struggles, and they've watched Kai fight his medical condition their entire lives. Jaden, the natural leader, wraps his arm around Kai's shoulders and whispers fierce promises that everything will be okay. Zion the peacemaker starts rubbing Kai's back in gentle circles the same way their mother Serena does when Kai has bad nights. But they're 8 years old and there's only so much comfort they can provide when their brother's medical condition is spiraling out of control. Marcus makes his first phone call and listen to the controlled fury in his voice as he speaks to his assistant Jennifer Martinez back in Chicago. He doesn't raise his voice, doesn't use profanity, but every word carries the weight of a father whose child is suffering. He asks Jennifer to pull up the Skyline Airlines acquisition documents, the contracts that made him the majority shareholder of this very airline just 3 months ago. But the second call breaks your heart. Hear Marcus's voice crack as he calls his wife Serena, the woman who waited 8 years to become a mother, who spent countless nights in the NICU watching Kai fight for his life. He tells her that their miracle baby is being denied the medical care he needs, that flight attendants are treating their precious boy like he's lying about his condition. Serena's response comes through the phone speaker loud enough for the boys to hear. "Marcus, protect our babies. Do whatever you have to do. Those boys are our entire world." Her voice carries the fierce love of a mother who knows exactly what it cost them to have these children and exactly how much Kai has already suffered in his short life. The third call is to Dr. Rodriguez Martinez, the pediatric gastroenterologist who performed Kai's surgery as a baby and has monitored his condition for 8 years. Listen to the urgency in Marcus's voice as he explains the situation. His son hasn't eaten in 4 hours, is showing signs of distress, and airline staff are refusing to provide the medically necessary meals that were pre-ordered and confirmed. Dr. Martinez's response is immediate and terrifying. Kai is approaching a medical emergency. Children with pyloric stenosis who go too long without eating can develop severe dehydration, electrolyte imbalances, and metabolic acidosis. The doctor demands to speak directly to the flight crew to explain the medical necessity of immediate feeding. But when Marcus approaches Rebecca with the phone asking her to speak with Kai's doctor, Rebecca's response reveals the true depth of her prejudice and cruelty. She refuses to take the call. She tells Marcus that she's not going to be manipulated by made-up medical emergencies. She accuses this billionaire father of coaching his child to fake a condition for special treatment. Feel the moment when Rebecca Thompson seals her fate. Because in that instant, she doesn't just dismiss a child's medical needs. She accuses a family that has survived 8 years of infertility, multiple surgeries, and countless medical appointments of lying about their son's life-threatening condition. Meanwhile, Kai's condition deteriorates rapidly. Witness what happens when a child with pyloric stenosis goes too long without eating. First, the stomach cramps intensify until Kai is doubled over in his seat, tears streaming down his face. Then comes the dry heaving, his small body convulsing as his empty stomach tries to expel acid that has nowhere to go. Other passengers begin to notice and express concern. A woman who is a pediatric nurse offers to help, but Rebecca blocks her access to Kai, claiming that allowing unauthorized medical intervention violates airline policy. A businessman in seat 2A starts filming Rebecca's behavior on his phone, documenting evidence that will soon be crucial. Observe the exact moment when Kai's condition becomes a full medical emergency. He starts vomiting bile, his body going limp with dehydration. His medical bracelet catches the light as his small hand falls to his side. The engraved words, "Pyloric stenosis frequent feeding required," visible to everyone except the flight attendants who refuse to look. Jaden and Zion are crying now, scared for their brother and confused about why the adults won't help. They've seen Kai sick before, but never like this. Never when help was available, but being deliberately withheld. They keep asking their father to make the flight attendants give Kai food, not understanding that their father is fighting a battle against prejudice and cruelty. Marcus makes a fourth call, this one to his head of security, instructing him to have medical personnel standing by at LAX and to prepare legal documentation for multiple lawsuits. His voice remains calm, but other passengers can see the barely controlled rage in his eyes as he watches his miracle child suffer. Then something beautiful happens that will restore your faith in humanity. A passenger in seat 1C, an elderly black woman named Dorothy Washington, approaches Marcus with tears in her eyes. She's a retired nurse who raised 5 children and can't stand watching Kai suffer. She tells Marcus she has crackers in her purse and asks if she can give them to Kai. But when Dorothy tries to offer Kai her crackers, Rebecca physically interposes herself between them. She tells this grandmother that she cannot provide food to another passenger, that it violates FAA regulations, and that she needs to return to her seat immediately. Witness the moment when an entire airplane full of passengers realizes they're watching a child being tortured by airline employees. Captain Rivera finally receives word that there's a medical emergency in first class. When she arrives and sees Kai's condition, her training kicks in immediately. She orders Rebecca to bring any available food for the child. But Rebecca protests, claiming that making exceptions will encourage other passengers to fake medical conditions. That's when Captain Rivera makes the call that will define her career. She tells Rebecca that she's ordering her to provide food for a child in medical distress, and if she refuses, she'll have her arrested for child endangerment the moment they land. Rebecca reluctantly brings crackers, but the damage is done. Kai has been suffering for hours when relief could have been provided immediately. As Kai slowly sips apple juice and nibbles crackers, his color gradually returning. Captain Rivera pulls Marcus aside for a private conversation that will change everything. She's reviewed the passenger manifest and realizes who she's been dealing with. Marcus Williams isn't just any concerned father. He's the new majority owner of Skyline Airlines. Prepare yourself for what happens next, because Captain Rivera's realization that she and her crew have been torturing the children of their new boss is just the beginning. Marcus Williams hasn't revealed his identity yet, but he's been documenting every moment of discrimination and medical neglect his sons have experienced. The turning point isn't just that Marcus owns the airline. It's that he's been watching his employees demonstrate exactly the kind of prejudice and cruelty he spent his entire career fighting against. And now he has the power to do something about it. This story is about to explode into a confrontation that will leave you cheering for justice. Subscribe now, because Marcus Williams is about to reveal who he really is, and Rebecca Thompson's world is about to come crashing down in the most satisfying way possible. What would you do if you discovered that your employees had tortured your children? Because Marcus Williams' response will redefine what justice looks like at 30,000 FT. Witness the moment when everything changes on Skyline Airlines, Flight 447. Captain Rivera approaches Marcus with the recognition dawning in her eyes, her face pale with the realization of what has just happened under her command. She spent 15 years flying for various airlines, and she's never seen anything like the systematic cruelty her crew has shown to these children. Marcus remains seated beside Kai, gently stroking his son's hair as the boy slowly recovers from his medical episode. The crackers and apple juice are helping, but the psychological damage of being denied care, of being forced to beg for medical necessity, of being accused of lying about his condition, that will take much longer to heal. Captain Rivera clears her throat and speaks in a voice barely above a whisper, hoping other passengers won't overhear what she's about to say. Mr. Williams, I believe there's been a terrible misunderstanding. I've just reviewed our passenger manifest more carefully, and I realize that your company. But Marcus raises his hand, stopping her mid-sentence. His voice is calm, controlled, but every passenger in first class can hear the steel beneath his words. Captain Rivera, there's been no misunderstanding. I've been sitting here for 4 hours watching exactly how your crew treats black children in first class. I've been taking notes on how your employees respond to medical emergencies. And I've been documenting every moment of discrimination my sons have experienced. Feel the silence that falls over the first-class cabin as other passengers realize they're witnessing something historic. The businessman in 2A continues filming. Dorothy Washington. The retired nurse moves closer to hear every word. Even the passengers who initially complained about the boys being too noisy are now watching with rapt attention. Marcus stands slowly, his 6.2 frame imposing even in the confined space of the airplane cabin. He looks directly at Rebecca Thompson, who is suddenly trying to make herself invisible behind the meal cart. Rebecca, would you like to know who I am? Would you like to understand exactly whose children you've been tormenting for the past 4 hours? Rebecca's face goes ashen as the pieces begin falling into place. The platinum corporate credit card she dismissed the private phone calls to assistants and security teams. The calm, controlled demeanor of someone used to wielding power. But it's too late for Rebecca to backpedal now. Her behavior has been witnessed and documented by an entire cabin full of passengers. Marcus reaches into his briefcase and pulls out a leather portfolio. He opens it slowly, deliberately, giving Rebecca time to understand that her world is about to change forever. I am Marcus Williams, founder and CEO of Williams Tech Industries. 3 months ago, my company acquired 60% of Skyline Airlines. That makes me your boss, Rebecca. And for the past 4 hours, I've been watching you torture my children. The reaction is immediate and electric. Passengers gasp audibly. Sarah Chin drops the safety demonstration card she was holding. Rebecca's legs actually buckle, and she has to grab the seat back to keep from falling. But Marcus isn't finished. These 3 boys in white polo shirts and jeans, they're not just passengers, Rebecca. They're my miracle children. My wife and I tried for 8 years to have them. 8 years of failed treatments, miscarriages, and heartbreak. When they finally arrived, one of them nearly died from the same condition you've been dismissing all afternoon. Listen to the emotion creeping into Marcus's voice as he continues. His love for his son's evident in every word. Kai has pyloric stenosis. He's had it since birth. He's had multiple surgeries. He carries a medical bracelet that you refuse to read. He follows a strict eating schedule that prevents exactly the kind of medical emergency you just forced him to endure. Marcus kneels down beside Kai's seat, and the contrast is stark. This powerful billionaire, gentle and loving with his recovering son, versus the flight attendant who showed no compassion for a sick child. Show Rebecca your bracelet, buddy. Show her the medical information she wouldn't look at. Kai, still weak but recovering, holds up his small wrist with the medical bracelet clearly visible. The engraving reads, Kai Williams pyloric stenosis, frequent feeding required. Emergency contact, Dr. Martinez. Every passenger can see it now, this clear medical documentation that Rebecca dismissed. Rebecca, my 8-year-old son, got on his knees in this aisle and begged you for food that could prevent a medical emergency. He showed you his medical bracelet and explained his condition in his own words. And you told him you didn't care what condition he thought he had and accused his parents of coaching him to lie. The shame on Rebecca's face is visible to everyone. But Marcus continues with the methodical precision of a man who has built an empire through careful planning and execution. Sarah, you're the junior flight attendant, but you're also responsible for passenger safety. You saw a child in medical distress and did nothing because you were afraid to contradict Rebecca's authority. Sarah starts crying quietly, finally understanding the magnitude of what she allowed to happen through her inaction. Marcus's voice remains measured, but there's steel in every word. I don't want apologies. I want accountability because what you've done today isn't just poor customer service. It's discrimination. It's medical neglect. And it's exactly the kind of systemic prejudice that my company will no longer tolerate. Observe the ripple effect throughout the cabin as Marcus's words sink in. Other passengers are nodding in agreement, some filming with their phones, others openly crying as they fully understand what these children have endured. The elderly woman Dorothy speaks up with the moral authority of someone who has lived through decades of discrimination. I've never seen anything like what I witnessed today. That flight attendant should be ashamed of herself. But Marcus saves his most devastating words for last, and they're delivered with the quiet authority of someone who has the power to back up every promise he makes. Rebecca, in 15 minutes, this plane will land at LAX. When we deplane, you'll find security officers waiting to escort you from the premises. Your employment with Skyline Airlines is terminated immediately. Rebecca tries to protest to claim that she was just following procedures, but Marcus cuts her off with surgical precision. The procedures were clear. Rebecca, accommodate passengers with medical needs. Provide requested meals for documented conditions. Treat all passengers with dignity and respect. You violated every one of those procedures because you saw a black father with 3 black children in first class and decided we didn't belong there. Sarah, you're suspended pending a full investigation. Your fear of confronting Rebecca's prejudice doesn't excuse your failure to protect a child in medical distress. Captain Rivera, you'll be required to undergo additional training on medical emergencies and crew management, but you get to keep your job because you ultimately did the right thing when it mattered. The transformation in the cabin is complete. Rebecca, who strutted around with authority just hours before, is now slumped in defeat, tears streaming down her face as she realizes the magnitude of her cruelty and its consequences. Sarah is quietly crying, finally, understanding what her silence and inaction cost. Captain Rivera stands at attention, accepting responsibility for her crew's failures. But the most important transformation is in the 3 little boys who started this flight. Excited about their first business trip, Jaden and Zion are looking at their father with a new understanding of his power and their own worth. And Kai, still recovering from his medical episode, looks up at Marcus with absolute trust and love. Prepare yourself for the conclusion of this story because we're about to see what real justice looks like when a father with unlimited resources decides to protect his miracle children. The aftermath of this flight will change airline policies and careers and prove that sometimes good really does triumph over evil. If you're cheering for Marcus Williams right now, smash that subscribe button because the ending of this story will leave you with tears of joy and a restored faith that parents will move mountains to protect their children. What's the most powerful thing someone has ever done to protect their children? Because Marcus Williams isn't finished yet, and what he does next will create ripple effects throughout the entire aviation industry. Experience the final 15 minutes of Flight 447 as Marcus Williams transforms from passenger to protector to the architect of systematic change. The plane is beginning its descent into Los Angeles, but the real journey, the one toward justice and accountability, is just beginning. Marcus returns to his seat beside his sons and witness the gentle way he checks on each of them. He touches Kai's forehead to check for fever, asks Jaden how he's feeling about what he witnessed, and wraps Zion in a hug when he sees tears in his youngest son's eyes. Because before everything else, Marcus is a father, and his children's well-being comes before any corporate power or public justice. But while he comforts his sons, Marcus is also orchestrating a response that will echo throughout the aviation industry. Listen to the phone calls he makes in rapid succession. First, to his head of legal affairs, instructing her to file federal discrimination complaints with the Department of Transportation. Second, to his head of human resources, demanding a complete review of hiring and training practices at Skyline Airlines. Third, to his public relations team, preparing a statement about the systemic changes coming to the airline industry. The other passengers watch this display of power with fascination and approval. They've witnessed something extraordinary, not just wealth being used for revenge, but justice being methodically constructed in real time. Dorothy Washington, the retired nurse, approaches Marcus with tears in her eyes and tells him that watching him protect his children has restored her faith in fatherhood. As the plane touches down at LAX, observe the scene waiting on the tarmac. Security officers, medical personnel, and news crews have gathered because Marcus's team works with the same efficiency that built his tech empire. Rebecca Thompson will not simply lose her job, she'll face the full consequences of discriminating against children and endangering a child's health. But Marcus saves his most important words for his sons. As they prepare to deplane, He kneels down to their eye level one more time, looking into 3 pairs of identical dark eyes that mirror his own. His voice is gentle but firm as he explains what just happened in terms his 8-year-old boys can understand. Jaden, Kai, Zion. I want you to listen to me carefully. What happened to you today was wrong. Adults are supposed to protect children, not hurt them. You did nothing wrong. You were polite, respectful, and brave, especially you, Kai, when you weren't feeling well. Hear the wisdom in his next words, the lesson that will shape these boys for the rest of their lives. Sometimes people will treat you differently because of how you look, or because they have wrong ideas about who belongs where. But you belong everywhere. Your mind and your heart can take you. And when you grow up, you use your power to make sure no other children go through what you went through today. The boys nod solemnly, absorbing this lesson in dignity, justice, and responsibility. They've witnessed their father's power, but more importantly, they've seen him use it to protect them and to create change that will help other children. As they walk off the plane, witness the scene that opened our story. But now you understand its full meaning. Marcus Williams and his 3 sons in white polo shirts and dark jeans walking past Rebecca Thompson as she's escorted away by security. Past Sarah Chin, who's crying as she realizes her career in aviation is over. Past Captain Rivera, who will spend months undergoing additional training to ensure this never happens again. But the story doesn't end with the firing of airline employees. Follow the ripple effects in the weeks that follow Flight 447. Marcus Williams announces sweeping changes to Skyline Airlines policies, hiring practices, and training programs. He establishes the Miracle Children Foundation, dedicated to supporting families dealing with infertility and children with medical conditions who face discrimination. Kai Williams becomes the young face of pyloric stenosis awareness, helping other families understand the condition and advocate for their children's needs. His gentle spirit and articulate explanation of his medical condition in interviews helps educate thousands of people about this serious but manageable condition. Rebecca Thompson's termination becomes a case study in airline training programs nationwide. Her behavior is used as an example of how unconscious bias can escalate into discrimination and child endangerment. She faces federal charges for violating the civil rights of passengers and endangering a child's health. Sarah Chin eventually finds work at a smaller airline after completing extensive training on discrimination and medical accommodations. She speaks publicly about her failure to advocate for Kai and becomes an unexpected voice for change in airline customer service training. Captain Rivera keeps her job and becomes one of Skyline Airlines' most effective trainers for crew members, learning to handle medical emergencies and discrimination complaints. Her decision to ultimately do the right thing, even late in the crisis, saves her career and makes her a better leader. But the most important changes happen in the Williams household. Imagine the scene when Marcus returns home with the boys that evening. Serena Williams, the mother who waited 8 years to hold these children, wraps them in hugs that last forever. She listens to their story with tears streaming down her face, proud of their bravery and heartbroken that they had to endure such cruelty. 6 months later, observe the Williams family boarding another Skyline Airlines flight. But this time, the experience is completely different. The flight crew has been trained on medical accommodations, cultural sensitivity, and the importance of treating every passenger with dignity. Kai's special meals arrive exactly on schedule. The flight attendants check on him regularly, not with suspicion, but with genuine care for his well-being. The boys are older now, more aware of the world's complexities, but also more confident in their own worth. They know that their father's money didn't make them special. Their parents' love, their own character, and their responsibility to others made them special. The money just gave them the power to create change. During this flight, Kai approaches the flight attendant, a young woman named Maria Rodriguez, who has been specially trained on medical accommodations. He shows her his medical bracelet, explains his condition with the confidence of a child who knows his needs are valid and receives the care he requires with dignity and respect. Witness the moment when Kai looks out the airplane window and tells his father he still wants to be a pilot when he grows up. Despite everything he's been through, despite the discrimination and medical challenges, his dreams haven't dimmed. If anything, they've grown stronger because he knows he'll use his position to make flying safer and more welcoming for every child. The story of Flight 447 becomes legend in aviation circles, business schools, and civil rights organizations. It's taught as a case study in how systemic discrimination operates, how power can be used for justice, and how one family's courage to fight back can create changes that protect countless others. Marcus Williams never sought fame from this incident, but he uses the attention to advocate for broader changes in how businesses train employees, handle discrimination, complaints, and accommodate customers with medical needs. His testimony before Congress leads to new federal requirements for airline staff training and passenger protection. The Williams triplets grow up knowing their story mattered, that their experience on that plane led to meaningful change. They understand that being treated with dignity isn't something they have to earn. It's something they deserve simply for being human. And every time they fly, every time they see a child being treated with kindness and respect by airline staff, they know that their painful experience created something beautiful, a world where no child has to beg for medical care, where no family faces discrimination alone, and where justice isn't just for the wealthy and powerful. The final image of our story brings us full circle. Picture the Williams family arriving at their destination, walking through the airport with their heads held high. 3 boys in white polo shirts and dark jeans, flanked by parents who fought for them, surrounded by a world they helped make a little bit better. Because that's what real power looks like. Not the ability to destroy your enemies, but the wisdom to create systematic change that protects the most vulnerable among us. Marcus Williams didn't just fire a flight crew. He proved that when good people refuse to accept injustice, they can move mountains. This is why representation matters. This is why speaking up matters. This is why using your privilege to protect others matters. The Williams triplets learned all of these lessons at 30,000 FT, and they'll carry them for the rest of their lives. Their story reminds us that miracles aren't just about getting what you've prayed for. They're about what you do with those blessings once you receive them. Marcus and Serena Williams waited 8 years for their miracle children. And when those children faced discrimination, their parents proved that some fights are worth everything. If this story moved you, if it made you think about your own responsibility to speak up for others, if it restored your faith that justice can prevail, then smash that subscribe button and share this video, because stories like this need to be told, remembered, and used to inspire change. The Williams triplets are teenagers now, all pursuing their dreams with the confidence that comes from knowing they're loved, supported, and capable of changing the world. Kai is indeed studying to become a pilot. Jaden is interested in business and social justice. And Zion is exploring medicine with a focus on helping children with rare conditions. Their parents' love gave them life. But their experience on Flight 447 gave them purpose, and that purpose continues to ripple out into the world, making it safer and more just for every child who follows in their footsteps. What would you have done if you were on that plane and witnessed what happened to the Williams boys? Would you have spoken up? Would you have recorded the discrimination? Would you have offered help when flight attendants refused to provide it? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, because every voice matters in the fight against injustice. And remember, you don't have to be a billionaire to make a difference. You just have to be willing to speak up when you see something wrong, to treat every child with dignity, and to use whatever power you have to protect the vulnerable. Because in the end, that's what the Williams family story really teaches us, that love, courage, and determination can triumph over prejudice, cruelty, and indifference. The miracle wasn't just that Marcus and Serena Williams finally had children after 8 years of trying. The miracle was watching those children face adversity with grace, seeing their father use his power for justice, and witnessing a family transform their pain into purpose. That's a miracle we can all be part of, one act of kindness and courage at a time. But our story doesn't end with justice served at $30,000 FT. Follow the earthquake of change that ripples through the aviation industry and beyond in the months following Flight 447. Because when a billionaire father decides to transform an entire system to protect children like his, the effects reach far beyond one airline. Witness the scene 6 months later at the Federal Aviation Administration headquarters in Washington, D.C. Marcus Williams, dressed in his signature black suit, sits before a congressional subcommittee on transportation safety. But he's not alone. Beside him sits 8-year-old Kai Williams, now a confident young advocate who has found his voice through his pain. Listen as Kai explains his medical condition to senators and representatives in words that are both simple and powerful. My name is Kai Williams, and I have something called pyloric stenosis. It means my stomach is different, and I need to eat small amounts of food every 2 hours or I get very sick. On the airplane, I showed the flight attendant my medical bracelet and asked for help, but she told me she didn't care about my condition and that I was lying. The room is silent as this articulate child continues. I had to get on my knees and beg for one cracker while I was getting sicker and sicker. No child should ever have to do that. That's why my daddy and I are here today, so no other kids like me have to go through what I went through. Observe the faces of the legislators as they realize they're not just hearing about policy changes. They're listening to a child who survived systematic discrimination and medical neglect. Senator Maria Rodriguez wipes tears from her eyes as she asks Kai about his dreams for the future. I still want to be a pilot, Kai says with the determination that has carried him through surgery, medical challenges, and now advocacy. But when I grow up and fly planes, I'm going to make sure every child feels safe and welcomed no matter what they look like or what medical conditions they have. The result of this testimony is the Williams Act for Passenger Protection groundbreaking legislation that requires comprehensive discrimination training for all airline employees, mandatory medical accommodation protocols, and federal oversight of airline responses to passenger complaints involving children and medical needs. But follow the story deeper because the changes go beyond legislation. Step inside the Rebecca Thompson Community Center in South Los Angeles, a facility funded by the Williams Foundation and built in the neighborhood where Rebecca grew up. Yes, the same Rebecca Thompson who tormented the Williams children now has a community center named after her, but not for the reasons you might expect. Discover the twist that will restore your faith in redemption. After losing her job and facing federal charges, Rebecca Thompson spent 6 months in court-ordered counseling to address her implicit biases and discriminatory behavior. But something profound happened during those sessions. She began to understand the deep-seated prejudices that had shaped her actions, the assumptions she'd made about who belonged in first class, and the devastating impact of her cruelty on a sick child. Witness Rebecca's transformation as she volunteers at the very community center named after her, working with children from underprivileged backgrounds who dream of careers in aviation. She teaches them about airline safety, helps them with homework, and most importantly tells them her story not as a victim, but as someone who learned the hard way that prejudice hurts everyone it touches. I was the flight attendant who refused to help Kai Williams. She tells a group of 10-year-olds during story time. I let my wrong ideas about who belonged where stop me from seeing a sick little boy who just needed help. I want you to learn from my mistake. Always treat everyone with kindness, no matter what they look like or where they come from. The children listen with wide eyes, not knowing they're hearing from someone whose story has become a cautionary tale taught in diversity training programs across the country. But they understand the lesson that everyone deserves dignity and respect. Experience the emotional moment when Marcus Williams visits the community center for its grand opening. He brings Jaden, Kai, and Zion with him, now 9 years old and even more inseparable than before. When the boys see Rebecca reading to children in the corner, there's a moment of recognition that could go either way. But witness what happens next. A scene that will move you to tears. Kai approaches Rebecca slowly, his brothers flanking him for support. He looks up at the woman who once made him beg for food and speaks with the wisdom of a child who has learned forgiveness. "Miss Rebecca," he says quietly, "my daddy told me you help kids here now. I'm glad you learned to be kind." Then, in a gesture that surprises everyone, including his parents, Kai extends his small hand for a handshake. "I forgive you." Rebecca breaks down completely, taking Kai's small hand in both of hers. "I'm so sorry," she whispers through tears. "You were just a little boy who needed help, and I failed you. But I promise I'll spend the rest of my life making sure no other child goes through what you did." Follow the ripple effects that continue to spread. Sarah Chin, the junior flight attendant who failed to speak up, has become one of the aviation industry's most sought-after trainers on bystander intervention and moral courage. She travels to airlines across the country teaching employees that silence in the face of discrimination makes them complicit. "I watched a child suffer because I was afraid to contradict my supervisor," she tells groups of flight attendants during training sessions. "My silence allowed Rebecca's prejudice to nearly kill an 8-year-old boy." Never let fear of confrontation stop you from protecting a passenger, especially a child. Captain Rivera has risen to become Skyline Airlines Director of Safety and Inclusion, overseeing the most comprehensive anti-discrimination training program in the aviation industry. Every new hire at Skyline Airlines learns about Flight 447, about the Williams family, and about their personal responsibility to treat every passenger with dignity. The final lesson of Flight 447 isn't just about discrimination or medical advocacy or even justice. It's about the power of families who refuse to let their suffering be meaningless, who transform their trials into triumph, not just for themselves, but for every family who comes after them. As the plane begins its descent into Los Angeles, picture the Williams family walking through LAX not as the traumatized passengers they once were, but as the advocates, change makers, and symbols of hope they've become. Behind them walk 12 other families, all confident that their children's medical needs will be respected, all protected by the changes one family's courage created. That's the true miracle of the Williams triplets. Not just that they survived 8 years of their parents' infertility struggles, not just that Kai overcame his medical challenges, but that they used their experience to build a world where no child has to beg for dignity, where no family faces discrimination alone, and where justice extends beyond the wealthy and powerful to protect every vulnerable person who needs an advocate. The story of Flight 447 will be told for generations, not just as a tale of discrimination overcome, but as proof that when good people refuse to accept injustice. When families stand together in the face of adversity, and when individuals use their power to protect the vulnerable, they really can change the world. And somewhere in that LAX terminal, walking confidently toward their next adventure, 3 teenage boys in matching T-shirts that read Miracle Children Foundation carry forward a legacy that started with their parents' 8-year wait for them and continues with their own commitment to ensuring that every child, regardless of race, medical condition, or family circumstances, has the right to be treated with dignity, respect, and love. That's not just a story. That's a movement. And it all started with 3 8-year-old boys, a father's love, and the understanding that some fights are worth everything because they protect everyone who comes after you. Until we see you again.